Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to head down to Australia once again for the first time in what feels like absolutely ages. Now, I honestly couldn't tell you when the last time I did an Australian craft beer review was, but a good number of years ago to say the least. And the last time I was actually in Australia was back in 2015. So at this stage, I would say the Australian craft beer scene was very much in its infancy. But as has been the case in many other places, there's been a bit of an explosion over the last few years, and there are now many new breweries. But I was pleasantly surprised when I arrived here in Japan to find that a number of Australian breweries had made their way north up here, and I thought it was a really cool opportunity to have a look at a few of those breweries here on the channel. So look forward to a few Australian reviews over the next couple of videos. But yeah, for this first review that we're doing from Australia in a wee while, we're going to go to a brewery that seems to have built a very good reputation for themselves. They are still a relatively new addition to the Australian beer scene, and they do a variety of different styles. So it seems like a very good place to start in my opinion, and the actual beer we're looking at is also a very highly rated one according to Untappd. So needless to say, I'm very curious to see what this beer is going to have in store for us. Hopefully it's another good one. Hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always I hope that you guys watching enjoy my take on this one. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to head to a little place called Emu Plains, which is on the western edge of Sydney in New South Wales, but this brewery also has roots in Katoomba, further out west in the Blue Mountain region, and that means that we're going to have a look at my first beer from Mountain Culture Beer Company. So this particular beer is called Jeffrey. It comes in at 11% ABV, and this is a New England Hazy Imperial Triple, whatever you want to call it, IPA. But this beer is quite an interesting one. It was produced in collaboration with a number of different breweries, who we'll mention a little bit later on in the video, but it was also brewed in the aftermath of their first Rauch Beer Festival that they did, and that very much sounds like something I would love to have been at. My whole love of craft beer began with the Bamberg Rauch beers from Germany, and it's definitely cool to see that the love of Rauch beers is spreading further afield to Australia as well. But yeah, I think this is a very good place to start. An 11% New England triple IPA from Australia, and Mountain Culture Beer Company, like I say, have built a very good reputation for themselves. So yeah, let's crack on with this one and see what it's all about. Incidentally, this beer was bought at craft beer base Mother Tree in Osaka, just close to Umeda, so go and check them out as well. Lovely brew pub with a good selection of craft beers to boot. But yeah, as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, however, just fast forward. All the usual links can be found in the video description below. That's the brewery website and the link to my future reviews that hopefully I can do from Mountain Culture Beer Company. This is the very first time I'm trying one of their beers, of course, but there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The support that you give is massively appreciated, and remember that you can go into the channel homepage and search for beer using the geography tagging system. Just go into the homepage, use the search bar, put your hometown, state, county, whatever you like in there. If I've reviewed beers from the area that you search for, they should pop up. Failing that though, you can check out the playlist of beers from different countries. There is a playlist there for the Australian beers. That's going to be added to over the next little while I'm here in Japan, and there are playlists there from a number of other different countries that you can check out as well. But yeah, let's go on to my brewery notes then, and I'll tell you a wee bit about Mountain Culture Beer Company. So Mountain Culture Beer Company, as I've mentioned to you already, are primarily based in Emu Plains in New South Wales on the western edge of Sydney, but the company was founded back in 2017 by DJ and Harriet McCready. So DJ was already a brewer, and he'd previously worked for Newcastle Brewery and Modus Operandi in Australia, but also for a certain Oscar Blues Brewing in Colorado over in the US, who are very well known, I have to say. But they started the brewery together in Katoomba, which is further out to the west of Sydney, and they renovated an old dilapidated building that was built back in 1912, and this building had previously housed the Echo, which was the local paper for many years, before also being home to a dancing saloon and a video store. But in total, the renovation took them about 18 months, and they opened their doors to the public in 2019. So this was actually the first brew pub in the Blue Mountain region ever, from what I understand. And if I remember correctly, I was actually in Katoomba in 2015, so this would have been a few years, of course, before the Mountain Culture Beer Company started, but I will need to go back there if they've still got their, since they still have their brew pub there. But there, at this original brew pub, they have a 12 hectolitre kit from Premier Steel, and they have 14 beers on tap with burgers on the menu as well. So a very good combination. But they now have a new facility in Emu Plains, which has a floor space of 7,000 square metres, and they operate a 25 hectolitre brewing kit along with a Crohn's canning line, which is why you've got these lovely half-litre cans there. They've got an on-site tap room as well, which has 20 taps, mainly of their own beer, but there are a few other things as well from what I understand, and they've got a food truck there that serves wood-fired pizza, which you can never go wrong with. But the new brewery opened in early 2023, and apparently this will give them the capacity to brew 8 million litres of beer per year at full tilt, compared to the 2 million litres that they were able to produce in Katoomba. But as of April 2023, when I'm reviewing this beer for you, these guys have produced 280 different kinds of beer according to Untappd, and like I said earlier, they do a variety of different styles. They had 4 beers in craft beer based Mother Tree, 3 of them were IPAs, and there was a fruited sour there as well. But from having had a little look, I should say, at their Untappd page, there's Imperial Stouts in there, they've got a barrel programme, there are some very, very interesting things going on at Mountain Culture Beer Company. But this was the one that really kind of caught my eye, because it was a collaboration with so many different breweries, and there was also the mention of a Rauch beer on the back of the can, so for me, that was what swung it toward buying this one. But yeah, that is all I can really tell you about Mountain Culture Beer Company for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can of course check out the brewery website. You can follow them on their usual social media. Facebook and Instagram are best for keeping up to date with the latest goings on, and you can check out the Untappd page to learn a little bit more about all of the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's go on and actually talk a little bit about the beer itself. So like I said to you earlier, this one was brewed in the aftermath of their first Rauch Beer Festival that they did. It's brewed in collaboration with a number of different breweries. So these are Balter Brewing Company and Range Brewing, both from Queensland, Fixation Brewing, Hop Nation Brewing Company, Dollar Bill Brewing, Banks Brewing, all of which are from Victoria, Wildflower Brewing and Blending, White Bay Beer Company, both of which are from New South Wales, Rocky Ridge Brewing, who are from Western Australia, WA, and then also Garage Project, who are from New Zealand. So yeah, quite a list of different breweries on there, but we are only going to focus on the home one for this video, because doing brewery histories for all of those would be quite crazy, and I do hope that I can do individual reviews for those breweries later on. But the beer itself, as we mentioned earlier, is an 11% New England triple IPA. It was brewed as a collaboration with the attendees of the Mountain Culture Rauch Beer Festival. They split the recipe apparently into 11 different parts, including the water profile, the yeast, the hop additions, and a few wild cards, and this is why they call it a Jeffrey. And Jeffrey, I guess, is an ode to that. I forget what film that was. Was that Get Him to the Greek, where they had the Jeffrey, you know, the cigarette with everything imaginable inside it, and they smoked it and they went a bit crazy. So I'm guessing that's what this is the name is a reference to. But this one is hopped with Galaxy, Riwaka, Warrior, Citra and Nectaron. There's some rye malt in there, and there's also some oak chips. We know the hops in this beer pretty well. Galaxy, of course, is an Australian hop, about 14% alpha acid, quite pungent passion fruity notes in my experience, but also juicy mango and pineapple. Riwaka is a New Zealand hop. That one comes in about 6% alpha acid, if I remember correctly, and it gives you this sort of pineapple-y, grapefruity and kind of pine resin-y quality. Warrior is American, that's quite strong, about 16% alpha acid, kind of orangey and grapefruity, if I remember correctly. Citra we know very well as well, 14% alpha acid, American, lots of juicy mango, but also some lemon limey qualities. And Nectaron is in a New Zealand hop, about 11% alpha acid, kind of pineapple-y and kind of orangey in my experience as well. So quite an impressive hop bill in this one, needless to say. But yeah, I'll just let you have a little look at the artwork on the can before we open this one up. I have to say it is quite nice, and I'm probably going to keep this can actually. I do like this one. So there you can see at the top, Jeffrey, plain silver top on the can. Like I mentioned to you, this one is 500 millilitres. Unfortunately, the little blurb on the back is kind of blocked by the import sticker. But yeah, that happens sometimes. But you can see on the bottom there, made in Australia. And there's the QR code if any of you do want to scan that, of course. But yeah, just a shame I don't have my original 4K camera with me. at the moment, because you would have been able to get that quite nicely. So yeah, as I say, 11% New England triple IPA, this one. Let's get it out into the glass and see what it's all about. I'd also like you to see this. You can see a number of the different breweries there that have participated in this one, so it's not going to focus very well. But anyway, let's get this guy out into the glass and see what it's all about. My first Australian beer in I don't know how long. But yeah, definitely need to get down there again, visit my uncle, visit the family on my mum's side as well in Adelaide, and go and do some out and about videos. That is absolutely needed, I have to say. So, there we are. A little bit of sediment in this one. I'm guessing it's been sitting in the fridge for a wee while. But yeah, we'll need to see how fresh this one actually is. But hopefully it's still in good condition, especially it's a triple IPA, so it should hopefully be alright. But yeah, anyway, as you can see, this beer is poured with a lovely kind of 2/3 finger of a frothy, well, more kind of bumpy actually, I would say kind of cream coloured head. Yeah, you can see, I'll just let you have a little look at the size of the bubbles there. Before we open up, you can see my lovely Mino glass, of course, one of our great breweries that we have here in Osaka. But yeah, quite a bumpy head on that one, I have to say. Just going to turn off my computer screen there. We don't need the brewery notes anymore in this one. But yeah, it looks very, very nice, this beer. As you can see, there is quite a little bit of visible sedimentation in this one. You can kind of see it down here. Like I say, I'm not sure exactly how fresh this beer is going to be, but hopefully it's still in good condition, of course. But it has been cold chained all the way from Australia up here to Japan, which is good. Have to say that. You have to compliment them on that. The Japanese do look after the products. But yeah, 1 or 2 big bubbles sticking toward the side of the glass, a few little ones coming up toward the bottom of the head there. But overall, it does look really nice. That head has faded away to be quite a thin foamy layer, and then you've got that thicker foamy ring just around the edge of the glass there. Not too much in the way of visible carbonation, I have to say, but yeah. In terms of the colour of this beer, this one does have a little bit more of a kind of orangey tint to it. So remember, the colour of your beer depends on 1, the type of malts that you use. This goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. 2, length of your wort boil is also going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker colour of beer. But any barrel aging you do or adjuncts you put in will affect the colour of the beer too, but you don't often have to care about that when it comes to IPAs of any description, apart from fruit IPAs, of course. But yeah, this one for me, I'm guessing this will have a little bit of a kind of sweeter, like carapils or something like that in it to give you this deeper orangey colour. But we have to remember as well, it's quite a strong one at 11% ABV. So yeah, you do need a little bit of a sweeter malt in there just to balance the beer out a wee bit more. So yeah, nothing overly surprising about this beer in terms of its appearance. Let's have a closer look at the aroma and just see how we get on with this one. Very, very curious about this beer, as I've said. Yeah, it's really interesting. Yeah, I have to say the aroma of this beer is not madly pungent. It's actually a very smooth and quite subtle aroma that we're getting out of this one. But we do also have to remember that this beer might not be in its prime freshness, and that is one of the things, you know, that's why we don't get many Australian beers like this back home in Scotland or in Sweden, where I live. Yeah, it's just the transport time. You know, you can import some really nice imperial stouts and barley wines and stuff, no problem, but getting IPAs and stuff like that is a little bit more tricky, I guess you could say. But yeah, aroma-wise, this one, it's very, very smooth. For me, as I've said to you many a time before, there are quite a few elements you need to think about when it comes to New England IPAs. 6 elements for me. So when it comes to this style, you need to think about the kind of farmhousey, yeasty side of things, the riding and grainy side of it. Those 2 are a bit more common in American brewed IPAs in my experience, or New England IPAs I should say, but you've also got wheaty bitiness, oaty creaminess, barley malt bread, and the sweeter side of things. These are the 6 elements you should think about in New England IPAs. The first impression I have of this one is that it's quite smooth and oaty, but also a good little bit of a barley malt presence in there, and because this beer contains oak chips, it actually comes across as very, very woody as well. I'd be very curious to know where the oak is actually from. European oak, in my experience, tends to be a little bit drier and maybe just a little touch spicy almost, whereas American oak tends to be quite smooth and very vanilla-like. in a number of ways. So I don't know if oak trees are that. I can't really remember if there's that many oak trees in Australia, but yeah, yeah, the aroma that comes out of this one is absolutely lovely, I have to say. So you've got that lovely, smooth, woody, and kind of bready, oaty base. Then the green component of this one for me is quite grassy, and then you've got a lot of kind of juicy, smooth, tropical fruit actually. So the way that this beer goes together, I think, is really quite nice. But let's break the aroma down and describe it a wee bit more in depth for you. The backbone is definitely a wee bit more kind of, you've got a little bit of that kind of smooth white bread crusty character in there. You can smell there's a little touch, there's a good little bit of that smooth oaky character. I wonder if it's American oak that's been put in here. Oak chips and oak barrel, of course, behave quite differently when you put them in beer. We'll talk about that later. But yeah, there's a little bit of there's a very light sort of wholemeal brown bready character to this one. Some fluffy white bread in there too. A wee bit of a wheaty. There's a wee bit of a wheaty smoothness to this one. There's a little bit of wheaty bitiness in the back of the nose, but not too much. But a lot of oaty, creamy character coming out of this beer too. And that mixes in well with the woody notes that the beer has. Now, as I've said to you before on the channel, when it comes to the oaty side of these New England IPAs, you can often tell how fresh your beer is based on what the oats smell like. So the drier the oats are, the older the beer is, the creamier they are, the fresher they are. This beer actually does still smell quite oaty and creamy, so I don't think it's too old, but the sedimentation that you have in this one indicates that it might be a wee bit older actually. But yeah, we'll just need to see. As long as it tastes good, that is the main thing. So yeah, for me, there's quite a bit of oaty creaminess to this one. There's a good little bit of sweetness in there, a bit of butterscotch, a bit of butter candy, maybe a little bit of biscuit and things like that as well. McVitie's digestives, yeah, a few of these things going on. But yeah, you would expect that when the beer is 11%. It's a bit of a beast, this one, actually, a New England triple. You could probably argue if it goes to 12%, then it's a New England quadruple. So it's kind of bordering. It's at the higher end of the triple for me, I would say. But yeah, that's a debate for another day. In terms of the green component with this one, it's quite interesting. Again, there are 3 different types of hoppings that you can use in IPAs. Early addition hopping, assuming that you have a 90-minute wort boil, will take place within the first hour of the wort boil. That gives you mainly bitterness. Late addition hopping within the last half hour of the wort boil, little bit of bitterness, mainly flavour and aroma. Dry hopping after the wort boil is complete will give you pretty much all flavour and aroma. New England IPAs tend to use the latter 2, late addition and dry hopping. West Coast IPAs use all 3. Early addition hopping tends to dominate. You've got more time and with more heat to extract the chemicals from the hops, which is why you get the kind of big dank characters in West Coast IPAs. But with New England IPAs, you tend to get brighter and kind of fresher green components. So for me, this one is quite grassy in a lot of ways. There is a little bit of floral character behind it, but I find the green component of this beer to be a little touch earthy, a little bit herbal, but mainly wet and grassy with a wee bit of floral backing to it. On the fruity side of things, it's kind of what you would expect, to be honest with you. For me, there's quite a little bit of orange to this one from the New Zealand Nectaron and from the Warrior as well. So you've got that nice oily orange in there, but then the Galaxy and the Citra are giving you a bit of tropical fruit. There's a lot of juicy mango, which will come from both of the two, but you've also got that stronger passion fruit too, which is again going to come from both of them. But I get a wee bit of pineapple out of this one, which is more likely to come from the Galaxy, and I think the Rawaka is going to give you a little touch of that as well. So yeah, it's interesting how all of that kind of pieces together in this one. So for me, a little bit of pungent passion fruit, big juicy mango, a little bit of pineapple as well, and then just an oily orangey character from the Nectaron. Nectaron is quite a new hop for me. It's maybe been a bit more prominent in Australia and New Zealand for a wee while, but it's only really reached Europe in very recent times, I have to say. A few of the Danish and Swedish breweries that I'm very familiar with have been using it a bit more. But yeah, aroma-wise, this beer is very, very nice, I have to say. And I like the oaky character that it has. That's quite unusual. So yeah, let's have a taste of this and see what it's all about. This one, pardon me, is called the Jeffrey. 11% ABV New England Triple IPA from Mountain Culture Beer Company in Katoomba and Emu Plains, New South Wales, in Australia. Brewed in collaboration with a number of different breweries who hopefully we can cover on the channel at some point fairly soon. But let's get stuck in. Slàinte, skål, cheers. Yeah. That is pretty damn good, I have to say. Yeah. It's a monster. It is an absolute monster of a beer, this one. But it is pretty damn nice. It isn't in its freshest condition, but I still think this is pretty damn good. So big thumbs up to Mountain Beer Culture and everybody else who was involved in producing this one. I will put a list of the different breweries involved in the video description below, but like I say, it would have been too long to do a brewery history for each of them, although out of all of these I think it's only Garage Project in New Zealand that have been covered on the channel before. But yeah, that's a pretty damn impressive beer. Just going to say big thumbs up to them for that. The first impression that we have of this one, it's very, very smooth, and it has a little bit of a dryness to the aftertaste because of the oak chips, but the malty side of things is very, very smooth, a mix of bready and oaty. The green component is very nice as well, quite wet and grassy like I was expecting from the aroma. Then you've just got this lovely juicy fruity character to this one as well, but a lovely, lovely beer this one, I have to say. Big thumbs up. Let's try and just break this down and describe the flavour for you a wee bit more in depth, as we always do. And one thing I will say about this is it has got a wee bit of oily character to it as well, which is probably something you want from a higher ABV IPA. So yeah, middle third of your palate then. The backbone of this beer, you've got a lovely little bit of a kind of fresh, white bready bread crust coming out of this one. That is the backbone of your beer. Although in fairness, it's a bit difficult to say whether it's the oaky, you've got a layer of bread crust and you've also got the layer of oak. I think, in fairness, I think maybe the oak is giving you the base layer of this beer. And as I said earlier, when it comes to using wooden beer, whether it's barrel or oak chips, they behave a bit differently. Oak, like chips, give you a bit more dryness, whereas the barrel gives you a wee bit more smoothness. I think this beer is using oak chips, so it gives you that wee bit more of a dryness. You've got that lovely smooth oaky character in there, and to me, just from the flavour, it's American oak, but like I say, I don't know how common Australian oak is, if there is even such a thing. There probably is, but remember, American oak and European oak trees are a slightly different species. Yeah, something we need to research a bit more, but yeah, the oaky character that you have in this beer is very, very smooth. You've got that white, that fresh white bready bread crust sitting above it, and then there's a wee touch of like a wholemeal brown bready layer. Then you get a more fluffy, you get a little bit of a more kind of fluffy white bready layer above that. You can feel the wheat in there kind of densifying the beer out, and the wheat does have a wee bit of zippiness and bitiness to it, but we'll come to that later. But this beer is really layered in that middle third of your palate. Like I say, oak, bread crust, wholemeal bread, white bread, wheat, and then above the wheaty layer, you've got a bit more of a kind of oaty, creamy character to this one. So yeah, I do like how that goes together. Yeah, so the oaty side of this beer, it does still have some of its creaminess, but yeah, you can tell this beer, it's over 3 months old anyway. It's somewhere, I think this is somewhere between 3 and 6 months old, to be honest with you. You can tell from the oaty character, like I say. So above the wheaty there, you've got this kind of circle in the middle of your palate where the oaty character lies, and you can feel in the dead centre, the oats do still have a little bit of creaminess, but as you move further out toward the extremities of that middle third of your palate, you can feel they get gradually more dry. But you've also got that little bit more. You've also got that little bit of a more kind of sweet component to the beer. So you've got a lovely little bit of. You have a lovely little bit of like Werther's Original butter candy, butterscotchy sort of thing, but above the oats you have a little bit of a more kind of biscuity, McVitie's digestive biscuity type quality coming out of the beer. Yeah. So the middle third of your palate actually does have quite a bit of complexity in this one, which is quite interesting. I don't think we really need to say much more about that. We can go on to the back third of the palate now, where you get a bit more of the yeasty character. So at the border region between middle and back third of your palate, you can feel a little bit of a kind of white bready build-up in there. The base of that back third of your palate is a little bit more. It's got a little bit more of a. The woody character has a little bit more dryness to it. As I always say, sweeter flavours come out further forward on the palate, drier and more bitter flavours come out further back. So yeah, you've got a wee bit of a, you've got a little bit of a kind of more dry character coming out of the oak. The bread crusty character is also a little bit more grainy. Then you've got the brown bready layer is a little bit taller and a little bit more airy. The same with the white bready layer above that. Then you can feel above the white bread, the wheat is there. The wheat gives you a little bit more bitiness and zip on that back third of the palate. And above that, you have the kind of farmhousey, yeasty bready notes. So you've got this really farmhousey, bready, yeasty character just sitting above that. But it's a little bit crackery as well, the yeasty side of this beer. And you'll get more and more of the yeastiness the further into the aftertaste you go. But the back third of the palate, you can feel the flavour is definitely taller. And as you come further forward into the middle third of your palate, it just condenses down and squashes together that little bit more. So I think that covers everything we need to say about the malty and yeasty side of this beer. Let's go on to the hoppy side of things, and we'll kick off with the green component. So the green component for me is quite interesting with this one. There's a little bit of earthiness there in the back corners of the palate, but it's actually quite a bright earthiness that I'm getting out of this one. As you move further forward, there's a wee bit of herbal character there, and you can feel as you move further and further forward, there is perhaps a little bit of a kind of pine needly note out of this one, which I think is going to come from the Rawaka and maybe the Warrior in this beer. There could be a little bit of early edition hopping going on here. You do get a bit more bitterness out of this beer the further into the aftertaste. So yeah, a little bit of pine resin there, and you've got a nice kind of floral, aromatic sort of thing at the front corners of the palate too. Then round the front curve of the tongue, there's a wee bit of a more oily, and there's a wee bit of a more kind of oily, grassy sort of thing as well, which I do really quite like in this one. So yeah, look, good mix of green component in this one, and this beer does have a little bit more bite to it, which in fairness, at 11% ABV, even in a New England IPA, you do need to have a little bit more bitterness just to balance out the kind of malty sweetness that you're going to get from the high alcohol content. So yeah, green component in this one for me is balancing out the beer very nicely. I think that's everything we need to say about it in fairness. In terms of the front third of your palate and the fruitiness then, the border region between front third and middle third of your palate, you get a nice little bit of a bready build up in there, a kind of white bready sort of thing. And then the base of that front third of your palate, there's still some of the oaky, smooth character in there. There's a bit of the bread crust and the white bread, and then you get that nice oily bubble where the juicy, fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer. So let's look at that. So yeah, for me, every hop is kind of contributing something a little bit. It's quite interesting. So if you go to the back of that front third of your palate, there's a little touch of grapefruit in there. That's going to come from the Galaxy and the Citra mainly. But then when you move further forward from that, there's a big oily passion fruit in there. Nice big juicy mango. So yeah, like I say, grapefruit, passion fruit, nice big juicy oily mango. as you reach the middle of that front third of your palate, there's a little bit of apricot in there, there's a little bit of an oily pineapple as well, and then as you go into the front half of the front third of your palate, you're getting a big oily orange, which is the nectaron, and the warrior that's going to give you that. I think the Ruaka is the one, I think the Ruaka might contribute to it a little bit, but I think the Ruaka is the one that's giving you the kind of pine needles and the pineapple in this one. Ruaka is quite an impressive hop when you think about it, about 5-6% alpha acid, but it can still have quite a punch to it. A lot of New Zealand hops are like that, in fairness. But yeah, for me, it's quite a nicely rounded beer, this one. I think the kind of orangey, oily characters that it has from Nectaron and Warrior balance out the sweetness that the beer has, and the slightly more bitter green component in there as well works quite well for the beer. So yeah, I really like how this one goes together. It gets a big thumbs up from me. Having oak chips in a New England triple IPA is quite an interesting concept. I don't think I've ever had a New England IPA before this one that has had some sort of oaky component to it. So yeah, this is what you want after 3,700 reviews. You want beers that are going to make you think a little bit, and this beer certainly has achieved that, and I can see why it's so highly rated. It was probably even better when it was in its freshest condition. But yeah, big thumbs up to Mountain Culture beer for this one. I'd love to try some of the things a bit fresher, and to try some of their other styles as well. I think that'd be very good, because even at I think this beer's got to be between 3 and 6 months old. It still is very impressive, I have to say. But yeah. Yeah, I think we can leave it at that for this one in terms of describing the flavour. Just a really lovely, lovely beer, and it certainly makes me want to try a few more of their beers, and hopefully the next time I make it to Sydney I can go out to the west and try a couple of the Mountain Beer Culture things on tap, either in Emu Plains or in Katoomba. That would be pretty awesome. But yeah, in terms of the mouthfeel of this one then, what can we say about it? For me, this is top end of mid-bodied, bottom end of full-bodied. Carbonation is really quite smooth in this one. It still has quite a clean mouthfeel to it, but it's also it's got quite a clean mouthfeel to it, but it also has a little bit of oiliness to it, which, you know, at 11%, and when it's an IPA, you would kind of expect that, to be honest. In terms of IBUs, this one I think has to be at least 40, maybe pushing 50 or 60. IBU count is always my weakest point of beer reviewing, so always take what I say in this regard with a bit of a pinch of salt. But I want to say this is maybe, I'm leaning towards saying this is 40, to be honest with you. It doesn't strike me as being overly bitter, but it is quite floral, and it has that bit of pine resiny character to it, so it could well be a little bit higher. 40 IBUs minimum, feels maybe a little bit more like 50, could be 60. I think that's a fair way to describe it. The malt base is really nice. You've got the dryness from the oak underneath, which comes out more the further into the aftertaste you go. You've got a lovely smoothness from the kind of bready and wheaty characteristics in the beer. The oats have a little bit of dryness, probably because of the age of the beer. There's a little bit of sweetness in there, and then the fruity side of the beer for me is quite oily. Good pungent passion fruit, a little bit of a more kind of oily, orangey sort of thing. But yeah, the way that everything goes together in this beer is really nice, and it gets a big thumbs up from me. So yeah, really very, very well done beer, this one, and I look forward to trying a few more Mountain Beer Cultural things. But this one was the Jeffrey, 11% ABV, a New England triple IPA with oak chips added into it, brewed in collaboration with, what is it, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 different breweries there, mainly from Australia, but one from New Zealand as well. So yeah, let's leave it at that. My first experience of an Australian craft beer in quite a long while. So yeah, once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Mountain Culture Beer Company as well, and hopefully we can return to these guys at some point very soon. But in the meantime, check out my social media, check out their social media. As I say, I'll put a list of all the other breweries that were in there and collaborating with this one. Check those guys out as well, and hopefully we can cover them on the channel at some point in the very near future. But until then, Slàinte, Skål, cheers, and I'll see you guys in the next review. Very cool to have my first Australian beer
in quite some time. Slàinte, skål, cheers, kampai.